officially get started?
I think we should get started, everybody. First and foremost, thank you for joining us today at our Microaggressions Not So Small After All. My name is Karen Brown, and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives here at Buffalo Niagara Partnership. Before we get started, we're going to just do a little housekeeping. If everybody can be on mute, sounds like I'm hearing a few voices in the background. So if everybody can place themselves on mute. All right, and so again, I'm Karen Brown. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives here at Buffalo Niagara Partnership. Super excited to be here today with my co-advocate from Buffalo Niagara Partnership, who I would like to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy McNamara, and I'm the Senior Manager, Member Engagement at the Partnership, and also an advocate for D&I at the Partnership. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, great. So let's get started and talk a little bit about our agenda, what we're going to be doing for the next 45 minutes. So our agenda looks a little bit like this. How did we get here? We're going to talk about the anatomy of microaggressions. We're going to have an interactive activity called Walk a Mile in My Shoes, talk about the impact of microaggressions, how to respond to microaggressions, and then we're going to end up with how we can be better together. And with all training sessions, we have objectives. And so our objectives today are to identify and define racial and other microaggressions, develop skills to respond to and prevent microaggressions. And of course, as always, we want to commit to being better together. And so with that said, we also will have just a few rules of engagement. We like to call them our B attitudes for our time here together. So we're hoping that everyone will be comfortable and participate at your own comfort level. Be ready to engage in open and honest dialogue. Be present, no cell phones or checking of email. Be open to new and different perspectives. Be aware of how your words affect others and be in search of understanding, not judgment. And also we want to be a scientist of our own behaviors, which is probably one of my first and most favorite B attitudes. And so we're going to get started with that. How does that sound? Nancy, how does that sound?
Sounds good to me. We are going.
All right, let's go. And so just to kind of get an assessment of where we are before we begin our discussion, we're going to start with a poll. And Nancy, I'm going to ask you if you would facilitate the poll for us.
Of course. So everybody, just to kind of set a baseline for today, we have a poll. Karen, can you put the poll up, please? There it is. All right.
There it goes.
Just kind of pick the one that you feel most comfortable with at the beginning of this session. And they are, I want to learn more about microaggressions. I've been a recipient of a microaggression. I cannot even spell microaggressions. And I may have personally delivered a microaggression. So pick the one that you feel best suits you. And we will let you know very shortly what the poll says.
All right, so go ahead and place your vote. Okay.
Do we have the results, Karen?
You know what? I am not seeing the results pop up. Oh, here they are. All right. Perfect. And so it looks like 68% of the people want to learn more about microaggressions and 21% have been a recipient of microaggressions. So with that 68% of people wanting to learn more, Nancy, I think everybody's in the right place.
Everybody is. So thank you, everyone. And let's get started.
All right. So Nancy, what I'm going to ask you to do is talk a little bit about how we got here. Okay, and unfortunately, our slides are not moving. Okay, let's try one more thing. Here we go. Here we go. So, Nancy, if you could talk a little bit about how we got here.
Sure. So, when the slides come up, I'll just talk until they come up. But in 1970, Chester Pierce coined the term microaggression. And he was an American psychiatrist who was at Harvard Medical School. And he coined that term in reference to, there he is, 1970, Chester Pierce. And he coined that term in reference to the insults he had regularly seen non-Black people level on Black people.
Mm.
In 1973, Mary Sloan, who was at the MIT Sloan School, she expanded the definition even further. And she expanded it to include aggressions towards women. So these became known as micro inequities. And in 2010, Dr. Daryl Wing Su from Columbia expanded the definition even further to include LGBTQ+, people with disabilities, etc. And what he defined microaggression was the brief, everyday exchange that sends denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their group memberships. The person making the comments may be otherwise well-intentioned, but he could be unaware of the potential impact of their words. So we're going to talk a little bit about intent and impact later on. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Right. And thank you, Nancy, for that. I think you laid a good foundation for how this microaggression, how this term came to be. But before we do that, there's a few concepts that I think they're worthy of introducing into this topic. Oftentimes when we have conversations about microaggressions, these 2 points aren't brought into the conversation. And I think that they're important that we talk about them today. And the first concept, and we have a few, is power. So when we talk about power, what we mean by that is social oppression exists when one social group, whether knowingly or unconsciously, exploits another social group for its own benefit. So that is the first concept when we talk about power. And then the other concept, with oftentimes when people hear this word in the DEI sector, we get a little bit nervous, but I think it's important that we acknowledge this term even as well. And that term is going to be privilege. And so when we talk about privilege, what we mean is both agents, those who are privileged in a hierarchy of oppression and targets, and those who are victimized and or penalized play a role in maintaining oppression. And so when you look at that definition, you think about those who are victimized or penalized. What exactly does that mean? So you might wonder how the targets are victimized and penalized. And look at it this way. The victims have historically been penalized to accept the treatment. And so really, what does that mean in real words?
Yeah, what does that mean in real words?
Yeah, in real words, we talk about, here's some examples of how people were penalized and they didn't have any other choice. They didn't have any, what we called earlier, power to change that. And think about the Jim Crow laws. The marginalized communities had no choice in those. They had no choice in the redlining in geographical areas, Chinese Exclusionary Act, and then, Marriage Equality Act. Those are, that's how the targeted people were subjected to that sort of privilege, and they had no choice into it. So you can look at it this way, that they were condition really without recourse to make any changes. It just simply was the way things are. And that is how things continued in our society. So does that make any sense? Does that bring it a little bit more into light?
It does. I like the examples because I think that really draws a picture of what this looks like.
And so when you look at it from that aspect, that's how power and privilege materialize in the country that we live in. And then there's just a few other concepts that are important to talk about from a microaggression standpoint. And so microaggressions are more than just racial. And oftentimes when you hear that term, you think of that it's racially infused, but it's more than just racial. And if you listen to what people say from a microaggressions aspect, those comments that people are making are offensive regardless of the context. And microaggressions themselves are cumulative. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means when we say that they're cumulative. And so with all of those facts and all those concepts coming together, so how does that surface in everyday life? And it surfaces in everyday life through microaggressions. And Nancy, I know you have some comments on that. So would you please share that with our audience?
Yes, so I think the slide that's up now shows a lot of subtle bias, shall we say, negative slights that have been made towards the individuals in the slide. So let's look at these. I would never have guessed someone so young could do so well on a project. Where was your family from before they came here? Your English is great for someone who isn't from this country. A lot of these are invalidating the person who is in the role, and they're subtle, but they're there. You are so articulate.
Oh boy.
You're the boss. So keep that in mind. These are all microaggressions. They are negative slights. They may or may not be known as the person is saying them. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward with this information.
Thank you, Nancy. And the next thing that we want to talk about is the makeup of microaggressions. And so it's interesting because when we research microaggressions, this is the most recognized definition of what microaggressions are. They're brief, commonplace, daily verbal, or behavioral or unintentional comments that people make. It is interesting because oftentimes when people say a microaggression, it may be something that they've learned in their family. It may be something that they've learned through their friends. And it's interesting because microaggressions are almost traditional and even generational. So they're passed down from family, from friends, all through your circle of communication. And most times without even recognizing that they are a microaggression. So that's where it becomes difficult to understand the damage that they could cause. And so when we look at this definition, is there anything that stands out for anyone?
So for me, Karen, I'd like to learn more about environmental indignities because that one's not super clear to me. The other ones are.
Yep, and so when we talk about the verbal, we know it's something that someone said, and behavioral, I want to give just a couple examples of that behavioral microaggression. And I'm sure in the state of COVID that we're in, this is something that happens all the time. That behavioral microaggression that often happens in the office is texting while someone is talking. All right, and so that's a microaggression that's being dismissive in that person and the knowledge that they're bringing to the conversation. So that's something that we want to throw out there just for people to be aware of. Even your behaviors are microaggressions. But the one that you actually asked me about was environmental, and that's probably a little bit more difficult to understand. So I have a couple examples when we talk about environmental. It is in the environment that we're in, and think about it from this aspect. When you see advertisements that say may only show one race, when you look at your company website and it's not truly representative of the individuals that work there. Types of relationships. When we do advertisements in our business that only shows female and male relationships. So looking at those from an environmental standpoint, those become the standard for what everybody expects and not really giving acknowledgement to all the many characteristics that make up diversity. So any questions on that? And I also want to invite people, if you have questions or if you have comments, please feel free to type those in the chat. We have learned that if our dialogue and our conversation between us and the people attending the session is open, we can learn a whole bunch more together. And so Nancy, let's move on to microaggressions, and they're multi-layered. Can you talk to us a little bit about the multi-layeredness of microaggressions?
Sure. So we have different types of microaggressions, and the first one is microassaults. So these are conscious and intentional actions or slurs. An example of that could be your kind doesn't understand English. It's subtle, it's intentional though. So definitely something that is said. I've heard this said myself and have shuddered when I've heard it. Micro insults subtly convey rudeness and insensitivity and demean a person's identity. So an example of that can be, that's so gay, you're so articulate. Think of the slide we just saw maybe 2 slides ago. That was one of the microaggressions on the slide. And micro invalidations, those are an alien in your own country, unintentionally misgendering, the denial of individual racism, sexism, or heterosexism. An example of that is there's only one race, the human race. And Karen, I think you have some other examples that may help to illustrate.
Yep, I definitely do. So when we talk about micro assaults, and this is one actually that has happened to me before, comparing your tan to a person of color, I'm almost as dark as you. And that's a definite assault, a micro assault. And then we have the micro insults, using someone's ethnicity as a Halloween costume. So that's another invalidator that individuals may not be aware of, but certainly micro assaults, and they definitely come through. They definitely come through in our everyday existence. And here's another one: microaggressions, mistaking people of the same race as the same person. I've been the victim of this micro thought. Actually, in my life, I've been the victim of many microaggressions, but this one is mistaking two people of color as the same person. This happened to me in grad school. And what's interesting is I'm 5'3", and the person that I was often mistaken for was about 6'2". And I found it interesting. The professor said to me, "Oh, I have difficulty telling you two apart." Well, the irony in that was the 20 other people that were not people of color, she could keep them straight. But that microaggression she used consistently, that she couldn't keep us apart. So those are some things that are microaggressions that happen in everyday interactions. All right. So it's also interesting, and when we talk about microaggressions, I've read that it can be the experience that's been described as by death by 1,000 paper cuts. And anyone who has ever had one paper cut, if you think about that, magnify that 1,000 times. And that's the feelings of what microaggressions can be. Also, they've been likened to, have been described by mosquito bites. All right, and we might say, okay, one bite, that doesn't hurt too much. But over time, imagine what those multiple bites can add up to, and they can build over time. And when we think about that, I know that we have an awesome video that Nancy found that kind of will bring that philosophy of microaggressions and mosquito bites to the forefront. And Nancy, why don't you set us up for that video?
Yeah, so we're going to have a very quick video. And basically what I'd like you to do as you're viewing the video is just to think, if you've ever been in one of these roles before, how that made you feel, maybe what your responses were. And if you can type those in the chat while you're viewing the video, we can have like a quick discussion after the video. So let's roll it.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while...
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland.
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date...
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
Going grocery shopping.
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
Commuting to work.
So when are you gonna have a baby?
Watching TV.
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
Or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every day.
Can I touch your hair?
Multiple times a day.
So pretty. Can I touch your hair?
Can I please?
Is annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes. Which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry black one.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So did anybody have any thoughts on the video?
Amazing.
You see, I love that. Yeah, so what struck you?
It's very common for me. Yeah. Somebody else said, honestly, it builds up and then explosion hits and you are the one overreacting.
Yes, that happens quite a bit as well. And I see we do have a question here that I just want to address. Someone has asked, can you explain why asking someone where they're originally from is considered a microaggression? And what the research shows us, it's usually implying that that person doesn't belong here. And when you look at it from a place of inclusion, And if you think about it from, from that perspective, you're saying that person, you're not really from America. You're really from wherever you are. And oftentimes individuals that are the recipient of this question are American citizens, but the implication is that they are not, and that they don't belong. So it promotes a feeling of not belonging. So I hope that answers the question. Well, Nancy, we got 25 messages in there.
Like
so,
incredible messages. Let me just read through a few of these. And yes, we will be sending the link with the after the symposium in your thank you note. So somebody said, I never even realized I'd experienced a lot of these in the past. Another one said that angry Black woman hits home all the time for me.
Yes.
So really some really good ones, being told you can't do something because of your gender or your height. So yes, it seems like a simple video, but I think sometimes something simple is what many of us can relate to. So thank you all for your comments.
Yeah, and I see that we're being asked to send the link. This recording is going to be out on our website, along with the link and all the PowerPoint presentations. And so we'll be
also in the chat, Karen. The link is in the chat. Yes.
All right. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. We've talked about microaggressions. We've kind of laid the foundation for where microaggressions come from. Hopefully this video kind of is going to bring the theory of the mosquito bites, kind of bringing it to the forefront. So what we want to do now is, as we promised earlier, we're going to have an interactive activity and see if we can pull all of these lessons together. So what we're promoting today is we want to have a new microaggression mindset. So let me explain to you a little bit of how this activity is going to how it's going to play out. We have some individuals that all of you are going to be dropped into, what do you call them, Nance? Into breakout rooms. There it is. There's a term. We're going to be dropped into breakout rooms. You're going to get a series of questions to answer. So each group is going to get 3 questions. And you're going to talk about those 3 questions from this perspective. We're going to talk about what is the intent. And so what does that mean? What are we trying to say? That's what we're going to look at it through that lens. And then next, what feeling might the recipient feel? And then what might you do to understand, diffuse, or process the situation a little bit better? So that's how that's going to break out. So you're going into breakout rooms, but you got one more assignment. You don't get away that easily. You're going to elect someone to be your speaker. So when we return back to the main group, one person from your group is going to be the speaker. You're going to pick one of those examples and you're going to share it with the group. So into the breakout rooms, your questions are.
Just a quick question. Do you think we can do it in 5 minutes?
Do I think we can do it in 5? Sure. We're going to do it in 5 minutes. All right. And Nancy is our official timekeeper. And so thank you for that, Nancy. We're going to do it in 5-minute breakout rooms. Talk about your 3 examples. Decide which one you're going to bring back to the group to discuss. We're going to do it from an intent, impact, and inclusive perspective. Any questions on that before we put you in the breakout rooms? We got it? All right. I think everybody's got it. And so our partners, King, is going to break you into breakout rooms, and that should start to happen in the next few seconds.
Who is the spokesperson from group 1? Can you come off mute?
Yeah, that was me. So I'm gonna ask for my group 1 support on that 3rd one, because somehow I knocked myself out of the room. So I apologize.
All right. So we're going to have you pick one of those examples, and that's the one we're going to debrief on.
Okay, so we did the one, I am not racist because I have marginalized cultured friends. So insert marginalized culture name there. So with the intent, we talked about the person is trying to say that there's no way that they could possibly be racist because they have friends of this marginalized population, so that would clear them of all racism. Yes. And the perception is that they may have made a oh, okay, I'm seeing that we didn't get to the 3rd on the room. Sorry, so then I'm bringing it home with this last piece. I better make it good. We're saying that they probably made an exception for this person in this friend group. So they probably they probably, it's not necessarily that they are not racist, it's just that they may have made an exception for this particular person or even particular people.
Okay. Karen, are you with us again? So you can see how damaging that would be, even though, because you looked at the intent and the impact and what that's going to mean and what it's going to make someone feel like. So that is a statement that I think many of us have heard before. So what we would ask is that you think of the intent, you think of the impact, and next time you hear that, perhaps you can talk to someone about what that really feels like and what that means. So great job with group 1. Do we have anybody from group 2? Thank you, Colin. Anybody from group 2? You would like to take one of your examples and just go through the intent and the impact.
I don't think we picked a person, but we discussed mainly the not a man, or which one's the man, which one's the woman.
Okay, yes.
It looks like Jill wanted to go in on that.
Sure, I can go in on that. So we talked about the impact of the statement. First of all, what's the intent? I think we all agree the intent was to make the situation that they're referring to fit within the speaker's lives. Maybe my relationship doesn't fit yours, so how can I make it fit? Explain to me, you know, who would be A and B, like in my situation, A and B. And then the impact of that is the feeling from the couple of, I need to make you fit with and be okay with my scenario. And that's really not their job. It is not their responsibility. It is not their, that weight is not on them. They don't have to be responsible to make me understand their relationship. That is not on them. It is on me to be accepting and to understand. And putting that pressure on them is just extremely unfair, and it's just too much.
Right. So that's another one that we need to look at it from their lens and not our lens. So great job on that. You're right. And we can't put that burden on others who may be different than us. It's our obligation to look at them and help. I mean, look at it through their lens of life, not ours. So thank you for that. Do we have anybody? I think we've got time for one more. Do we have group 3 or 4? Anybody volunteering here?
Well, room 4, we didn't pick a spokesperson either, but we chose.
Okay. Do you have somebody who would like to talk?
We chose All Lives Matter.
Okay.
And as far as intent, we talked about maybe people say it to sound inclusive, or some do it due to a lack of understanding. Some do it for self-protection. And maybe some people say it just not intending to be mean, but that it just comes off that way. And that's giving them the benefit of the doubt. We didn't get too much further than that as far as feeling. Obviously, depends on which side of that you're on, how you might feel. I don't know.
The impact of that?
We didn't get to that.
Okay.
So that's as far as we got.
Karen wants to talk so badly and she cannot. So, yeah, so with that, I think we need to think of, and Karen, feel free if you want to type something in the chat, maybe that would be helpful for you. Oh, somebody said to see if you can unmute all so that Karen can speak. Is that a possibility? Does that work? No? Okay. So Karen, what I'm going to do is ask you to put up your slides in the essence of time so that we can go through the final few slides. We're probably going to condense. And thank you all for being in your groups. And We will have those examples up online. If you would like to take those examples back with you and share them with your own communities when you leave the symposium. So can we get the slides back up? Technology?
If you just give me 1 second, I can try to get the slides up for you.
That would be great. Yeah, Karen, is there a dial-in number you can call in on?
Yeah, I sent Karen the dial-in number, so she should be able to use those.
Okay. These are Karen's note slides.
Yeah, this is all I have. So I'm just trying to find the right slide. Sorry,
So go to,
there we go.
Okay, so the impact of experience of microaggression, again, it creates an emotional tax. So can we see there we go. And what an emotional tax on individuals can do in your workplace is it can create a toxic environment. It can be the cause of misunderstanding. People can feel excluded. They're disengaged. And again, this all goes to, are you creating a culture that people want to be in? And especially in this day and age where you can recruit great talent, can you keep them? Is your environment free of microaggressions? So again, people can feel frustrated, disrespected, and prejudiced and judged. So those are all things that can lead to burnout. So you want to really, microaggression training can be great. That's why we want to know this is what a microaggression is so that we can talk about it. How can you respond to microaggression? So many of you in the chat were asking for ways that you could actually respond to microaggressions. Kind of. One of the best ways is to take a breath.
Can everybody hear me?
We can. You might want to up your volume.
You can hear me now?
A little bit, yeah. So one of the ways you might want to do is, she's getting there. Did I hear that correctly? Did the individual actually say what I thought I heard?
Yeah, I don't think it's loud enough, Jill.
Did I say something? I will just be quiet or I will be accused of being angry. Saying something will only make it worse.
All right,
and
sorry, babe.
Will hurt more than help. Next slide. So for those of you who are looking for what can you do, and this is something that, you know, I've really concentrated on because we're going to have uncomfortable conversations. So what can we do to kind of make things a little less tense? Apologize immediately. Take responsibility for your actions. You're going to feel defensive with an uncomfortable conversation. So it's good to learn to manage those feelings of defensiveness. Listen, our keynote speaker, Angela, talked about listening and the appropriate action. So listening intently to what happened. Recognize your own cultural conditioning, how you grew up, how people grew up. Do not defend yourself based on intentions. Reflect on what is being said and ground yourself so you can hear that difficult feedback because it's not always easy conversations. And no gaslighting. Next slide. So what do you think gaslighting is? There's so many different ideas about what it is and different definitions. So gaslighting sounds like this. It was just a joke. Why do you have to make everything about race? You're probably just imagining it. Remember, we talked about subtle insults. I know them. They are not racist. It's not that big of a deal. Well, it may be a big deal to those that have the microaggression level towards them. Blank people are racist too. And just to play the devil's advocate. Next slide. So respectful responses that you can make are ask for more clarification. Could you say more about what you mean by that? How have you actually come to think about that? Separate the intent from the impact. And you all did that exercise with intent and impact. I know you didn't realize this, but when you said blank, or behaved in a particular way, it was hurtful and offensive because of blank, because of this reason. And the third one is having like-minded allies to step in to respond can validate the experience for victims. Allyship is something that Angela talked about earlier, is a supportive mechanism for tackling microaggressions. It's about building relationships of trust, consistency, and accountability for everyone. Somebody is in the chat right now. An example I dealt with recently was sarcasm. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not sarcastic. Well, if the intent is, and the intent can be very different from the impact. So Ryan, thank you for sharing that, because where someone's saying it wasn't a big deal, it was a big deal to you. And that's what people have to remember. Next slide. Oh, so we have this one. So we try to think of a mnemonic to make things after this session, something you could easily take with you to remember how to be better, because remember that was one of our objectives in the beginning of this presentation. So the first one, we put together space. So keep in mind the S is for slowing down. Be mindful and considerate in your responses to others. The P was for perspective taking. You have to actively imagine the thoughts and the feelings of others. They can be very different than yours, so it's good to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Asking yourself, active self-questioning to challenge your assumptions. Your assumptions may be different from others, and that may not be the accurate way to look at things. Cultural intelligence. Interpret a person's behavior through their lens, not our lens, their lens. And I think that's a really great, that's my personal favorite that I try to think about a lot. And expand. If we don't know anybody different than the people in our bubble, we're never going to be able to learn more about others and get different viewpoints. So expanding, forming diverse relationships, friendships, that's actually going to be able to help us. So what I'd like everybody to do now in these last few minutes is to take one moment and write one of the things you've learned today that you're committed to doing as a result of our discussion today. And if you could put that in the chat, that would be fantastic. We're going to put these all together in a word cloud, and these will be on our diversity and inclusion webpage at the partnership. So you can be a part of this forever. So let's see some great ideas in the chat. I commit to slow down and be more intentional in what I say. Excellent. Love that one. Listen. Fantastic. Be open to feedback. Yeah, great ideas. Intention in my words and actions, walk a mile in others' shoes. Slow down. I love that. Listen again. Lots of listening. That's fantastic. So thank you. We're going to take these and put them in the word cloud. And can I have that last slide, please? So yes, I want to thank everyone.
Moment here.
I want to thank everyone today for putting up with all the technical difficulties here. We appreciate you working along with us. As I said before, all the information will be sent to you, so you will have a link to any of the examples or any of the slides that we shared during this. And one last slide, tangible takeaways. Do you know more about microaggressions than I did earlier? This is our last poll of the day. I'll monitor more closely the things I say to others. I still can't spell microaggression. I'm going to take some of this information back to my workplace and share it with my colleagues. So how are we looking with our last poll of the day? Thank you all again for your patience. Looks like I know more about microaggressions than I did earlier, and I will monitor more closely the things I say to others. And a lot of people said I'm going to share this information with my team. So I love to see that there's a lot of education that will go on as a result of this. So thank you all for your time today. I know we ran a little bit over, but Karen and I are very grateful that you chose to spend some time with us. Thank you for putting up again with the technical difficulties. And if any of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the partnership. we're more than happy to talk with you all. Thank you all for everything and enjoy the rest of the day.